DeAndre Jackson was 30 years old, and to everybody in Atlanta, he was the man who'd made it. He was one of those new money success stories that seemed to pop up out of nowhere. One week, you'd see him on Instagram posted up with a new Hellcat. The next, it was a G-Wagon parked in front of his high-rise condo on Peachtree. His whole life was a highlight reel of fancy dinners in Buckhead, courtside seats at the Hawks game, and captions that just said blessed, or, the hustle is different. If you asked him what he did, he'd always give you a cool, simple answer. Real estate, you know. Flipping houses out in Decatur. And people bought it. They wanted to believe it. He looked the part, he talked the part, and he gave them a story they could look up to. But the truth was a whole different thing, something that happened in the shadows while everyone was blinded by the shine. If they knew how he really paid for that lifestyle, they wouldn't be calling him an inspiration. They only saw the wins, not what it cost to get them. To the city, Dre was proof that a kid from the South Side could become a king overnight. He was admired, he was envied, and he was praised. But on this particular Saturday morning, sitting inside a plane at Hartsfield-Jackson, all of that was about to come crashing down. His secret was about to get out, the way all secrets eventually do. He was in Delta One, on a direct flight to London. The seat was big and plush, feeling more like a throne than a chair. He was sipping on some orange juice that glowed in the cabin light, scrolling through his phone with a slow, satisfied confidence. The Rolex on his wrist caught the light every time he moved. Everything about him, from his designer sweatsuit to his expensive cologne, just screamed money. He wasn't just some rich guy, he was a name in the community. He was the one who sponsored the youth football league back in his old neighborhood, the guy who handed out turkeys on Thanksgiving, the one who was building a new community center in East Point. He was Big Dre, the one who made it out and came back to give back. The plane door had already closed. The flight attendants had finished their safety checks. People were settling in, pulling out their headphones, ready for takeoff. That's when three men in plain, dark uniforms stepped onto the plane. They didn't make a sound, but their presence changed the air in the cabin. It suddenly felt heavy, like the stillness before a summer thunderstorm rolls through Atlanta. They didn't rush. They didn't raise their voices. One of them walked right up to DeAndre's seat. His voice was quiet, but it was firm. DeAndre Jackson? Dre looked up, his eyebrows knitting together in annoyance. Yeah, that's me. What's this about? We need you to come with us, sir. Just a routine check. A laugh came out of him, but it sounded hollow, like it was just for show. He crossed his arms, leaning back like he was untouchable. For real? Y'all know who I am, right? My name is on the flight manifest. I already took care of your people at the check-in. Why are you bothering me now? A few passengers started to turn their heads. You could hear whispers spreading through the cabin. Phones, hidden in people's laps, started to record. DeAndre stood up, making a show of adjusting the sleeves of his hoodie. He was trying to look powerful, but you could see a tiny tremor in his hands. Look, I already handled this. If I miss this flight because of y'all, people are gonna lose their jobs. I'm telling you right now. One of the younger officers spoke, his voice a little softer. Sir, we're just doing our jobs. Our supervisor gave the order himself. DeAndre slowly turned his head, like he was daring them. And that's when he saw him. Standing just inside the open plane door, behind the other men, was a tall, older man in a full command uniform. He wasn't smiling. His face was like stone, and his eyes were sharp and serious. When Dre saw that man, something inside him just broke. All that big talk, all that attitude, it just evaporated. He took a short, sharp breath and swallowed hard. His shoulders, which had been puffed up with pride, suddenly slumped. He reached down, grabbed his carry-on bag, and looked at the officer. He said, his voice barely a whisper. Let's go. And just like that, it was over. The plane sat there, silent. The passengers watched, stunned. The eagle had been snatched right out of the sky before he even got off the ground. As they walked him off the plane and onto the jet bridge, Dre leaned in close to one of the officers. Listen to me, he mumbled. I can make you a rich man. Right now. Just let this go. Act like it never happened. I'll cash app you whatever you want. The officer didn't even flinch. Sir, please just cooperate. We received a credible tip. The search is going to happen. Dre swallowed again. He knew what was coming. This wasn't supposed to happen. For years, he'd moved through airports like a ghost, his charm and his money making sure no one ever looked too closely. But his luck had finally run out. They took him to a small, private room away from the main terminal. The cameras were off, the door was locked. The senior officer pulled on a pair of blue gloves and calmly opened Dre's designer suitcase. At first, all they saw were neatly folded clothes, expensive sneakers, and toiletries. But then, the officer took a small knife and carefully sliced open the inner lining of the bag. The whole room went still. Tucked inside were tightly wrapped packages of narcotics. DeAndre's face went white. The senior officer didn't say a word. He just gave a small nod to one of his men. The man pulled out his phone and sent a quick message. Within 10 minutes, the story hit every blog in the social media was on fire. People couldn't believe it. They said it had to be a setup, a mistake, a hater trying to bring him down. But then the pictures and videos started to leak. DeAndre Jackson in handcuffs, his head down, being led through the airport by federal agents. The same Dre who gave motivational speeches to kids. The same one who was building that community center. It couldn't be real. But it was. To understand how the king of the city ended up in handcuffs, you have to go back. Way back. Back to a little house in East Point, long before the money, the cars, and the shame. Before he was Big Dre. He was just a quiet kid. He always said, "Yes, ma'am." Always kept to himself during family cookouts. He was the youngest, the one who kind of got lost in the noise. His mama, Keisha, she loved the idea of making it more than anything. Every time a cousin pulled up to the house in a new Benz, her eyes would light up. His dad, Malik, was an old-school, hard man. He was loud and didn't smile much. He had this belief that if a man hadn't figured his life out by 25, he was already a failure. That pressure, from both of them, was always there, sitting on DeAndre's shoulders like a physical weight. "Don't you bring no shame into this house," his father would always say. "All your brothers handled their business. If you can't get on their level, don't even call me your dad." And it was true, his older brothers were all shining. Marcus, the oldest, was a big-time used car dealer. By 25, he had 2 sprawling lots over on Buford Highway. People just called him Showtime Marcus. Jamal, the second oldest, got into local politics early. He was the type to wear sharp suits and wave at folks from the back of a blacked-out Escalade. At 27, he became one of the youngest county commissioners they'd ever seen. And the third brother, Kevin, moved out to the West Coast for a tech job and was sending money back home every month. His mother, Keisha, would take the money orders to the bank with a proud smile, telling all her friends how her son was making it big out in California. But DeAndre, he went to school. He went to Georgia State, hit the books hard, and came back home with a business degree. He had his cap and gown pictures and a professional-looking resume, but he didn't have a new car in the driveway or a thick stack of cash in his pocket. His father, Malik, looked at the diploma in his hand and let out a dry, humorless laugh. "That piece of paper ain't gonna pay the light bill," he said. "Your boys are out here buying property, and you're spending your time uploading resumes on Indeed. Wake up, son." That night, DeAndre just stood by his bedroom window, looking out at the dark street. His heart felt heavy in his chest. He was trying to make his family proud, but he never knew they'd be the ones to push him toward the very fire that would end up burning him down. The pressure wasn't always that intense. It really started the year DeAndre graduated. That same month, a kid from the neighborhood named Rico, who had dropped out of Tri-Cities High at 16 and just kind of vanished, came rolling back through East Point. He pulled up in a brand new Dodge Charger, the engine rumbling loud enough for the whole block to hear. The driver's side door swung open and Rico stepped out. He was dripping in gold chains, with a gold watch on his wrist and sunglasses that hid his eyes. He had a big, confident smile on his face. Little kids ran up to the car, just to touch it. The older men on their porches just folded their arms and watched. The women peeked out from behind their curtains. Rico just scanned the crowd and announced, "I'm in business for myself now." People started clapping and cheering for him. You could hear the whispers. "He didn't even finish school, but look at him now." DeAndre's father watched the whole scene from their front porch. His jaw was tight, and his chest rose and felt like he'd just been woken up from a bad dream. That evening, he called DeAndre into the living room. "You see that boy Rico?" he started. "He didn't waste his time chasing after some degree. He came home with a car for his daddy before he even turned 20. And you? You're just walking around here with a folder full of papers. School ain't where the money is." DeAndre's heart sank, but he didn't argue. He just tried harder. He got a customer service job at a call center. The pay wasn't great, but it was a start. After his first paycheck, he bought groceries for the house and sent his dad a little money. His father looked at the $100 bill and just sucked his teeth. "What is this? You think this is enough to run a household? You need to leave that job. That ain't for a real man." So, he got another job, this time at a bank downtown. He had to wear a tie every day and work long hours. 2 months in, his mother called him. "Your father says you're still wasting your time, baby. You need to find something that pays." The third job was at a logistics startup near the airport. It was fast-paced with a lot of potential, but the starting salary was low. His father didn't even let him explain the benefits. "Are they paying you more than what Rico's making?" "No." "Then stop playing with yourself." It felt like no matter what DeAndre did, it was never enough. It was like he was trying to cook a big family dinner, and every time he added more seasoning, they told him it was still bland. He didn't know it then, but they were about to bring someone into his life who would change everything, and not for the better. One afternoon, Rico was back in the neighborhood visiting his dad. That's when Malik saw his chance. He walked over to Rico's dad's house and asked if he could speak to him for a minute, private-like. "Rico," he began, his voice low and serious. I want my son DeAndre to be successful. I want him to have the things you have. I need you to help him. Can you show him the way? Rico looked at the older man for a long moment, then gave a slow nod. I got you. But he's gotta be willing to do what I do. No half-stepping. Malik came home that evening and found DeAndre in his room. Tomorrow, Rico is coming by to talk to you, he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. No more excuses. You ain't a kid anymore. The next evening, Rico pulled up to their house. The sun was setting, painting the sky that hazy orange and purple you get over the city in the summer. DeAndre was sitting on the front steps, just scrolling through his phone, when he heard a car horn give a little tap. He looked up. It was Rico's Charger, but this time he was alone. No crew, no loud music. Just him. He got out of the car and nodded toward the back of the house. Yo, let's chop it up. DeAndre followed him to the small backyard. It was quiet back there, with just the sound of crickets starting their nightly song. Rico sat down on an old picnic bench and looked right at DeAndre. Look, man, he said, his voice low. Your pops is worried about you. And I can see you're struggling. That little 9 to 5 ain't it? DeAndre didn't say anything, just listened. I know what they pay you. It ain't nothing. Come work with me, and I'll put you on. It ain't exactly legal, but it pays. We move things, we take trips, and we get a bag for it. Life ain't gotta be this hard, bruh. DeAndre's eyes narrowed. What are we talking about? Drugs? Rico just nodded once. Yeah. DeAndre shook his head. Nah, man. That's wrong. Rico let out a little laugh, but there was no humor in it. Wrong? Look at me. Do I look like I'm in jail? Poor folk are the only ones who got time to worry about right and wrong. For everybody else, it's about what works. And this works. That night, DeAndre couldn't sleep. He just sat on the edge of his bed, the words bouncing around in his head. The next morning, he went to his parents and told them everything Rico had said. His father, Malik, didn't even flinch. He just looked at his son with a hard expression. So what? Rico's been doing this for years. Is he locked up? Is he broke? If you ain't got the nerve to take a risk, then don't come in here complaining to me about being broke. His mother, Keisha, spoke up calmly, like she was talking about the weather. If that's what you're worried about, I know someone. A woman. She can help with that. She can give you something that will make you invisible to that kind of trouble. People are out here getting blessed because they know the right people to see. DeAndre just stared at them, his heart sinking. You want me to be a criminal? His father slammed his hand down on the kitchen table, making the salt shaker jump. I want you to be a man. When Rico bought that Charger, I told everybody at the barbershop that my boy was gonna do even bigger things. Now you want to make me a liar? His mother stood up, adjusting the wrap on her head. Tomorrow morning, we're going to see Mama Rose. She'll get you right. And just like that, the decision was made for him. DeAndre was pushed onto a path he never would have chosen for himself. Early the next morning, before the sun was even up, his mother shook him awake. Get dressed, she said. It's time to go. They drove to a part of town on the south side that people usually avoided. The streets were cracked and the houses were small and old. They finally pulled up to a little shotgun house that sat under a giant, old oak tree. It had no porch light, and the windows were dark. Keisha knocked once. A quiet voice from inside just said, "Come in." The air inside was thick and smelled like burnt sage and something else, something earthy and sweet. The only light came from a few candles burning in the corner. There, sitting in a low chair, was an old woman. Her hair was completely white, and her eyes looked like she had seen 1,000 lifetimes. This was Mama Rose. She didn't greet them, just looked at DeAndre for a long, silent moment. "You want to be safe?" she asked, her voice raspy. DeAndre opened his mouth to answer, but his mother spoke first. "Yes, Mama Rose. He can't ever be caught." The old woman nodded slowly. She reached into a small wooden box and took out a thin red thread and a little pouch of black powder. She mumbled some words that sounded ancient and heavy. She tied the red thread around DeAndre's waist, underneath his shirt. Then she rubbed the powder on his palms and blew it into the air. "He's covered," she said. "They won't see him. Not the police, not their dogs, not their machines." Then, she motioned for Keisha to step outside with her for a moment. On the front step, she spoke in a whisper. "The protection is strong," she said. "But you have to tell him. There's one rule. If he is ever with a woman during her cycle, especially the night before he travels, the protection will break. He must never do that." His mother nodded, but she made a choice right then and there. She wouldn't tell him the specifics. She was afraid it would scare him. When she got back in the car, she just told DeAndre. She said to be wise. "Stay away from messy situations and fast women." DeAndre nodded, thinking it was just general advice. The real warning, the one that truly mattered, was kept from him. And that silence would one day cost him everything. With Mama Rose's charm tied around his waist, DeAndre stepped into a new world. The first trip was easy. No one stopped him, no one searched his bag. The second trip was even smoother. The money started coming in, fast and heavy. He bought a new Escalade, then another car for his dad, a brand new Ford F-150 King Ranch. He wore designer clothes and expensive watches. He tore down his parents' old house in East Point and built a big, 2-story brick home in its place. He sent his mother on a trip to the Holy Land. She came back telling everyone, "My son is blessed. The Lord has favored our family." He didn't stop there. He funded a new wing for a community health clinic and had it named after his grandfather. The mayor came to the ribbon-cutting ceremony. The pastor at his family's church made him an honorary deacon. He became Big Dre, the hometown hero. But no one knew the truth. Behind all the charity and the big smiles was a secret wrapped in powder and a life built on a foundation of risk. And that foundation was held together by a single red thread. A thread that was about to snap. DeAndre was in his high-rise condo on Peachtree, going over his travel plans. Passport, ticket, bag, everything was laid out. The city lights twinkled below him like a sea of diamonds. That's when his phone started buzzing. It was his boys from back in the day. "Big Dre," they shouted through the speaker. "What you on tonight? The city's calling your name, man. You stay cooped up in that condo too much." At first, he said no. "Nah, y'all, I got that early flight to London tomorrow." But they kept on, laughing and clowning him, saying he was turning into an old man. Finally, he gave in. They picked him up in a blacked-out party bus, the bass from the speakers rattling the windows. They ended up at a private lounge in Buckhead where the lights were low and the drinks were expensive. Laughter filled the air, and the music was so loud you could feel it in your bones. It was the kind of night that felt like a movie. And that's when he saw her. She was standing by herself near the bar, not really trying to get anyone's attention, which is exactly why she got his. She had a calm energy about her. He walked over, and they just started talking. She laughed at his dumb jokes, and her voice was low and smooth. Her name was Tasha. They clicked. It was that simple. Later that night, they left the club together and went back to his place. That night, in the quiet of his condo high above the sleeping city, he broke the one and only rule Mama Rose had given his mother, the warning Keisha had been too afraid to share with him. He had no idea. He fell asleep peacefully, dreaming of his next big deal, of expanding his empire. But far away, on the south side of Atlanta, it was like a light went out. That little red thread tied around his waist, hidden under his clothes, lost its power. The protection, the charm, it was gone. It had vanished like a puff of smoke in the wind. The next morning, the sun came up, casting a golden glow over the city. DeAndre woke up feeling great. Today was the day. He put on a fresh designer tracksuit and his most expensive pair of sneakers. His gold chain rested on his chest. He packed his bag, making sure everything was perfect. He stepped into his black Escalade, and his driver held the door for him like he was royalty. "To the airport," DeAndre said, crossing his legs, feeling on top of the world. The ride down I-85 was smooth. No traffic, no stress, no fear. At Hartsfield-Jackson, people nodded at him. "Safe travels, Dre?" He smiled back, walking through the terminal like he owned the place. He breezed through the check-in counter, through security. The scanners didn't beep. The officers just waved him through. Just like always. He got on the plane, settled into his first-class seat, and felt that familiar sense of power. He was untouchable. And then it happened. The three officers stepped onto the plane. They walked straight to him. "DeAndre Jackson?" He looked up, and for a split second, it was like he was watching a scene from a bad dream. "Please step out with us. Just a quick search." His confident smile vanished. "I already handled this with your people. Do you know who I am?" Then he saw the senior officer standing at the door, silent and watching. And in that moment, DeAndre's heart started pounding in his chest. A cold dread washed over him. He stood up, and as he walked off that plane, he could feel the stares. He could hear the whispers. He could see the phones recording his every move. Something was different. He didn't feel that invisible shield around him anymore. The warmth of the charm was gone. He was out in the open, completely exposed. The lion had walked right into the hunter's trap, all alone. The trial was a blur. The courtroom was packed every day with reporters, strangers, and even some old friends who came just to watch the show. DeAndre stood there, not in a designer suit, but in a plain, wrinkled brown jumpsuit. The judge's words cut through the silence. "Guilty." After that, they took everything. The condo on Peachtree, the G-Wagon, the Hellcat, the house he was building out in Decatur. They even came for his parents' house, the big, beautiful brick home he'd built for them, the one that was his father's pride and joy. They put a lock on the high iron gate and hammered a forfeiture notice into the front yard. Malik and Keisha had to move back into the same small, broken-down house they had left behind. The one with the cracked walls and the drafty windows. The neighbors who used to wave and smile now just closed their curtains when they saw them. No one from the church came by anymore. All the talk about their blessed and successful son was replaced by a heavy, suffocating shame. They just sat in that old house, staring at the floor, living in the ruins of the dream they had pushed their son to build. And DeAndre, he was no longer Big Dre, the king of the city. He was just a headline, a fallen star. The prison walls were tall, thick, and gray. DeAndre sat on the cold concrete floor of his cell, his back against the wall. He barely ate. He barely spoke. Every day, he wrote letters to his parents on thin prison paper. The words were always the same. You did this to me. You pushed me here. This wasn't my dream, it was yours. You weren't my wings, you were the chains on my feet. He sent the letters over and over, but a reply never came. He just sat there, and in his hand, he'd hold what was left of the red thread from Mama Rose. It was tattered now, thin and weak. Once, it had made him feel invincible. Now, it just felt like a piece of string. He would stare at it for hours, and sometimes a small, bitter laugh would escape his lips. The very thing he thought was his strength was what had led to his destruction. Outside, the world moved on. Atlanta found new heroes, new hustlers to watch. People forgot his name. The blog posts got buried. And in time, DeAndre Jackson became nothing more than a story whispered in barbershops and on street corners. A lesson about a young man who wanted to fly so badly that he didn't realize his wings were made of wax, and he was heading straight for the sun.